Hello, BookTube. I had errands in downtown Boston very, very early this morning, so I went and left the bean and did them, and when they were over, it was time to go to the Brattle. I had to go to the Brattle Bookshop. I was right nearby, and it was right around the time when the Brattle opens, so I walked a few blocks over and browsed to my heart's content. I really needed it, and it was wonderful. For those of you who are new to the channel, the Brattle is a used bookstore in downtown Boston. They have 3 stories, an enormous turnaround. They're out buying books all the time. And they also have a sale lot next door, where another building would be. That's how big it is. That's the floor plan of an entire building next door. That's entirely sale books. Thousands and thousands of $1, $3, and $5 sale books, in no order other than price. So it's a browser's paradise. You go out there, you don't know where anything's going to be. You don't have any idea what you're going to find. Especially if you allow a certain amount of time. If you allow 2 or 3 weeks to go by between visits, then you'll be facing essentially an entirely new lot. And if you have the time and it's a beautiful day, this morning was bright and sunny and hot and beautiful. If you have the time and nothing's preying on you and maybe you need the relief, there's just no better way for a bookish person to spend an hour than just slowly, lovingly browsing around the books out in that sale lot. Don't go with any preconceived intent. Don't browse quickly, in other words. Don't fire through the carts looking for such and such or such and such. Instead, see what the carts have to offer you. It's a wonderful experience. It's actually, it hit the spot today. It was just what I needed today. But it has also saved me in far darker circumstances. There have been many, many times over the last 50, 55 years or whatever, where I've had personal issues. A dog dies, even though the death has been long foretold and I knew that it was coming and it wasn't a surprise. Still, sometimes the feelings are so raw that the only place that I could go was the Brattle sale lot, just to be alone with these books, just to be alone with them, watching them force me to smile as I find oldies but goodies that I haven't seen in years, or when I find new things that I didn't expect at all. It's a tremendous experience. I urge you all to try it at least once if you're anywhere in the Boston area. And I went today and I found a bunch of books. A bunch of books. And I want to show them to you. I want to show them to you and waffle on about them. We'll start with the paperbacks. It's quite a bit of biography here. But I didn't intend that. You cannot intend that when you go to the Brattle. If you go saying, I'm looking only for biographies, you won't find anything. I didn't know what the Brattle sale lot would yield up to me today. I never do. And the first 2 paperbacks are Everyman Paperback Classics. But this is a set that I didn't know existed. This is the E.F. Benson Map and Lucia novels. 3, I believe, novels in each book. Yeah, 3 in each book. In just 2 volumes. I've never seen these before. I had no idea that this existed. I usually get in America, there's a big white trade paperback or a huge oversized hardcover with a white dust jacket of all of these put together. That's usually the collection that I got. That's certainly the last collection that I got. I got one of those volumes at the Brattle last year, I think, and talked about it on this channel. A few other people talked about it on their channels, talked about how wonderful these books are. It's the rivalry between two queens in small ponds, basically, and a loving portrait of a certain era of England. You can't go wrong. These things are just wonderful. And I think probably one of you heard me say that a few times, and then maybe heard a couple of other booktubers say that without knowing that I said it, and decided that you really want it. And I think it was someone who, I don't remember the exact person, but I sent that volume out. The last volume that I got, the big white hardcover that I got, I sent that out in the mail because the person who asked for it, you're probably watching now, you would remind me if it is, the person who sheepishly requested that I send him that volume is in a situation that so many of you are, where there's just nothing. There's nothing for books anywhere in any distance. Where it's a big thing to go to a used bookstore, where the most you might have is a small charity shop on your high street that has a tiny selection of bad books that never change. And that if you're watching BookTube, you're loving it, but it's also torture because you're seeing all sorts of things recommended that you simply don't have access to unless you throw yourself on the mercy of buying books online. And quite a few of you understandably don't want to do that. I have for years, for decades before there was a BookTube, but for years on BookTube, I put myself forward as an alternative to that. That if you want, I do have access to used bookstores. I'll happily shop for something for you. If I find it, I'll happily mail it to you. At least that way you have someone vouching for the shape that the thing is in, the right edition that the thing is in, the lack of highlighting. People that sell books secondhand online lie a lot. And I won't do that. So one way or another, whoever it was, I feel certain the person who wanted that E.F. Benson volume said, I have no used bookstores anywhere near me, and I don't have the means to go out and get to a used bookstore, and I don't want to shop online. I have no alternative, except maybe that my library would eventually get a copy somewhere down the line. I don't know, one way or another. We certainly could have such a thing. That one volume, Map and Lucia, is not a big book. I mean, it is a big book, but it's not prohibitively big, which means you could make a one-volume annotated volume of these novels. I think that would be a lot of fun. I don't know what the literary estates are involved, but one way or another, I got rid of that volume that I got last year. So when I saw these, not only I'd never seen these before, but I don't have them. And I want always to have these fresh to hand. I have electronic volumes of everything in this set, but sometimes you want the book as well, and it helps to have the book in case somebody really wants it. I thought of Sean Standfast when I saw these volumes, these Wordsworth volumes. Which is kind of weird because he's held up 1 million books on his channel. But at one point he made a video holding up a bunch of Wordsworth classics that he had recently encountered, and commenting quite correctly that the Wordsworth paperbacks are not only really, really affordable, but often really good. Often there's very minimal critical apparatus because the more of that there is, the higher you drive up the price. But even so, a lot of them are very well done, very, very intelligently assembled. And so now I automatically think of him like he was the spokesperson for Wordsworth Classics. I shouldn't do. But one way or another, I grabbed these since everything you're seeing here was dirt cheap, so I grabbed it. Then this next one was a hit in the UK. I read 1 million reviews of this book, and I didn't save any of them because I correctly guessed that it would never get an American publication. And I don't think it ever had. This is a Thames and Hudson paperback of Weatherland. By Alexander Harris. Lovely thing. This is a big reappraisal and analysis and sort of prose poetry celebration of weather writing in England over the centuries. And yet, the chunks that I read were wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And this author also did a short biography of Virginia Woolf that is incredible. It was incredibly good. And this morning I've been reading bits and pieces of this thing, and it's just wonderful. The prose just leaps out at you. It'd be interesting anyway, in the way that I mentioned for The Assassin's Cloak, that big anthology of diary entries. I mentioned that one of the things that's interesting about that are the commonalities, and the two of the only commonalities are weather and the moon. Everything else changes. But the weather and the moon, people, not only are they the same, but people write about them. And that commonality is what's celebrated here. So that would be enough to make this book interesting, but the prose is just amazing. So I grabbed it. Happy to have it. This next one also is, I think, a UK trade paperback, a Penguin UK trade paperback of Michael Innes. Michael Innes's Appleby mysteries. There are 3 of them here. Hamlet Revenge, which I absolutely love. Death at the President's Lodging, which I seem to remember liking, and The Daffodil Affair, which I don't think I've ever read. So it's very possible that I will reinforce this thing and then just read it straight through. Innes was an academic, an extremely well-credentialed academic, who also wrote, under the pen name Michael Innes, wrote murder mysteries starring Henry Appleby, and they're terrifically good, just terrifically good. They're everything that you would hope if an academic wrote entertainments of murder mysteries, you hope that they would be really intelligent, but also playful, also understand the genre, not be condescending, not be long-winded, not be ponderous. And you don't always get that. I've read many examples of murder mysteries written by academics who could not shed academia, and you can't. If you do that, you're going to write a dreadful mystery, a dreadful reading experience. And these aren't like that. He put on a different hat completely to write them. No wonder he insisted on a pen name. Then the last paperback, I've been waiting to find this. I got rid of mine years and years ago. Probably gave it to somebody, and I've been waiting to find it. I've had many other opportunities to get a version of this book, but I knew the version that I want. This is the version that I want. I found it today in perfect condition. This is My Life and Loves, Frank Harris, with this great Peter DeSeve cover. Peter DeSeve is a New Yorker cartoonist. You'll recognize his style maybe from lots of covers for the New Yorker. He's also done a huge amount of Hollywood character design work for Disney movies, for instance, where a lot of times, if you're thinking of a character from a Disney animated movie, you'll be thinking of something that was at least part visually designed by this guy. This has an introduction by Anthony Burgess, who naturally considered Harris to be a kind of forerunner. And it's a huge thing. Look at this. I love how Queen Victoria is all disapproving the portrait on the back there. And all of his lives and loves are in bed with him. You've got the king and George Bernard Shaw. You've got everybody's all in bed with him while the statues frolic everywhere. This is one of the greatest autobiography volumes ever done. It's a huge thing. And you get abridged or jam-packed smaller versions. And I've seen a bunch of those, but this is the one that I wanted, this pretty thing. I got, this edition came out in this country in 1991. And in the 1990s, I got this at, I believe the bookstore where I found this, I don't even know if it still exists, was the New England Mobile Book Fair. I believe that is where I got this back in the 90s. The New England Mobile Book Fair was a terrific bookstore. It was a strange experience because they rather anachronistically held firm to the old habit of grouping books in the store by publisher instead of just by subject and in alphabetical order. So you had to find the publisher first, and then you could find the book you were looking for. And this was in their remainder section. I grabbed it then and got rid of that copy. So I was very happy to find it again. Perfect condition. Always worth a reread. Frank Harris is always worth a reread. Although I'm not 100% sure. I'm, of course, not the first person to wonder this. I'm not 100% sure what fraction of My Life and Loves is true. But it doesn't matter because it's such a great story. Then this next one, I showed you an example the other day of the Britain in Pictures library, these little hardcovers that are all uniform, and they're full of color photos of whatever subject whatever English subject they pick. English gardens, English wildlife, English essayists, English houses, English beers. The other day when I was at the Brattle, I saw a number of them all together, and I looked through them all, and naturally I was looking for not only presents for other people, but the one or two that I would want. I'm not a collector in the sense of someone who would want the whole set, just to have the whole set. Instead, I would go through it to look for the things that are of interest, the subjects that are of interest to me. And I showed you dogs in English history. I found a volume like that. Also found a volume for Mark Richardson. And I said at the time that if you were to call up a list of Britain in Pictures, you could probably guess which volume I got for him. But today, amazingly, I found a second and even larger grouping of those. That second and larger grouping was not there the other day when I went. Somebody must have got just hundreds of these things, and the second batch came up from the basement in between last time and this time. There were a huge number more there than there were today. So I again went through them all, and I found a second one that I want. Not dogs. There is not a volume on bats, unfortunately. There's one on wildlife of England, but I found this, which is a title we've already seen on this channel. This is Vita Sackville West writing about English country houses, but for this series. And I don't remember if I still have the volume. I just recently got her writing about English country houses. But I grabbed this again just because it was $1, and if I have already this volume, I'm not sure that I have it in this kind of shape. And Vita Sackville West, of course, is in a perfect position to write about English country houses, since she came, one chromosome away from inheriting one of the most magnificent of them all. The only reason that she didn't inherit Noel was because she was a woman. And that fact never sat well with her for the rest of her life, as you can imagine. It's a pretty dumb fact. And these are, they're all small, uniformly small, and they just take you through, they walk you through the subject in color and black and white. All of these, there's the tower from Noel. And it's I imagine, a fairly easy brief for the writers, because you just get to sort of stroll through the subject. You're not expected to do any kind of original research. The pictures need prose, as a friend of mine in publishing used to say. When I would ask him, well, what kind of, what kind of provenance, what kind of resume check are you doing here? And he would interrupt me and say, the pictures need prose. I think that's the case of what's going on here. But I grabbed this. I'm not sure there are any other volumes in that series as big as it is that I would want. Maybe English Wildlife. But with English Wildlife, there are a lot better volumes that I often see at the Brattle. And that exhausts our paperbacks and also our non-biographies. I'm pretty sure that everything else here is a biography. Starting with this one, which I have hauled before on this channel, and I got rid of it. I sent it to one of you. You were very interested, and again, told me a story that you just don't live anywhere near. A friend of mine used to say a red dirt town. And what he meant by that was, there's nothing here except a bar and a garage, a mechanics and a bar, and that's it. This is a red dirt town. There's nothing here. There's no library. There's no bookstores. There's no theater. There's nothing like that. And if you're there, you just won't have access to that. And it's not quite as bleak as that, because we do have the internet, right? We all do have the internet, and it is a miracle. But even so, quite a few of you have let me know over the years that you really don't have much in the way of book buying options, that you wish you did. Quite a few of you said that you sort of book browse vicariously through me when I do these Brattle videos. I'm happy to serve that purpose. But one of you picked this out and said that you really wanted it, and I knew that the Brattle would provide. So I let it go. But I found it again. This is the Regicide Brief by Geoffrey Robertson. And this is the story of John Cook. It's the story of, as you can see on the cover, it's the story of the execution of King Charles I. But it's also the story of John Cook, who was the lawyer who was given the task by the rebels to make a legal case for executing King Charles I. As the dust jacket says, he sacrificed his own life to make tyranny a crime. His trial of Charles I, the first trial of head of state for waging war on his own people, became a forerunner of the trials of Pinochet, Milosevic, and Saddam Hussein. His Puritan consciousness, political vision, and love of civil liberties gave him the courage to bring the king's trial to its dramatic conclusion, the English Republic. He would pay dearly for it. Charles I was beheaded, but 11 years later, Cook himself was arrested, tried, and brutally executed at the hands of Charles II. And Charles II hunting down the murderers of his father has been the subject of a few books, both of which, the two that I've read, are really good. This is the story of the man who when asked, came up with the legal underpinning to execute an anointed king. The dust jacket says, Charles I waged civil wars that cost 1 in 10 Englishmen their lives. But in 1649, Parliament was hard put to find a lawyer with the skill and daring to prosecute a king who claimed to be above the law. And Charles I, of course, did not claim to be above the law. He was above the law. All the laws flowed from him. He was the king, and not a usurper. He was the born and true king. So all the laws flowed from him. So he was above the law. And at his trial, he repeatedly said that. When he was asked, we have all the transcripts. When he was asked, he repeatedly said, "There is no one here who can try me. Maybe if you filled the jury box with my fellow monarchs, my fellow princes, maybe then." But otherwise, no man here in this room can try me. According to English jurisprudence, that was absolutely true. But John Cook found a way around it, and this book is terrific. It covers a lot of new ground despite centuries going on, and is really well done, really well written. Although the Alexander Harris book, Weatherland, probably beats everything in this haul for sheer writing ability. I cannot recommend her book on Virginia Woolf strongly enough. But one way or another, talking of the Brattle will provide, that is a saying that I use. Those of you who are new to the channel are encountering probably a whole new vocabulary of stuff that several of you have emailed me and said I'm brand new to the channel. The Brattle will provide is the phrase that I've been using since before most of your parents were born. And it means not that I will go looking for something at the Brattle sale lot, because as I've said, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't go and try to impose your will on the sale lot. It doesn't work. It never works. Instead, I have found over the years that if I am looking for something in my book collection and I don't have it, whether it's a specific book or a subject, oh, I don't have anything on fill in the blank, I have often found so much to be true that I now have a phrase for it that the Brattle will provide. That if I just make a mental note of it, sooner or later, sooner rather than later, I will find a book on that subject or the book I'm looking for at the Brattle, provided I don't push it. That has been true so many times I've lost count. But it's not infinite. Even at the Brattle, you can encounter a book and get the feeling that you're not going to see it again, or almost never. And then my answer, typically, if somebody says, oh, I saw this book either on your collection when I visited your house or on your video, can I have it? I feel bad asking, but I'm never going to find it any other way. Typically, my answer will be yes. I might drag my feet, but typically I will say yes. I am at heart a book recommender. So if I'm talking about a book, I really want you to have it. I don't just want to sing its praises, which, as you've seen, if you've watched this channel, you've seen that results in me buying the same book over and over again because I give it away. And this next book is an example of that, of both of those things, because I found this at the Brattle and I thought, wow, I've never seen this before. It's been out for decades. I've never seen a copy of this at the Brattle before. And you keep a sort of mental arithmetic of that, of how often you see something. I grabbed it, I read it, I loved it. I thought it was terrific. And then one of you wanted it. It came up on a biography shelf tour, I think 4 years ago. And somebody emailed me and said, I'd really like that. I'm particularly interested in the subject, and I've never seen the book. And I sympathized. I said, I've never seen it either, but I'll mail it to you. And I did. And it was nagging at me because that was not a case where I was saying the Brattle will provide. If I've never seen the book before, and if I've never seen it since, then maybe the Brattle won't turn up another copy. Maybe that was a Brattle book you should have held on to. But I did it anyway, and today I was rewarded after a long time, because here's this book again. This is Robert Bass. This is The Green Dragoon, a biography of Banastre Tarleton, one of the dandified, incompetent generals that King George III sent to the North America in order to make New England behave, in order to make New England do what he wants. Banastre Tarleton was never actually fought against New England, but it didn't matter. By then, New England's cause was the whole country's cause. You don't send armies to make New England do things. You just don't do that. He's a fascinating figure, though, and this is him and his love life and the woman who was eventually his North Star. And I loved the book. I thought it was just fantastic. It was with a pang in my heart that I put it in the mail and sent it away. And the Brattle provided. Here it is again. Now, don't get any ideas, any of you who are watching this. I'm going to reinforce this book because it's a little bit ratty. And I'm going to hold on to it, you know? And if you really, really want this, can't do without it, he was your great-great-grandfather or whatever, I will try to find you another copy of this book. It won't be easy. I very much doubt I will see this again at the Brattle. But I don't want to give up this volume, okay? I don't want to give up that volume. Then this next one is a figure near and dear to my heart. I've read pretty much everything that's been written about this particular member of the House of Windsor, and can't get enough. Even though he died very young, there's still a huge amount written on him. This is Prince Albert Victor of Clarence and Avondale. This is Prince Albert Victor, who was the older brother of King George V, and who was the original fiance of Queen Mary, the woman who'd go on to become Queen Mary. Originally came to England in order to marry the eldest son. And the eldest son was beautiful. Let me get you a picture, because, good Lord, the cartoon on the front simply does not do him justice. Let's get a real picture of the Dreamboat that we're talking about here. Yes, there we go. That is Prince Albert Victor, and he would have been King Albert if he'd lived, but he didn't. He lived, into his 20s, and then he got pneumonia and died at a time when that could happen, when there was no medicine, effectively no modern medicine. So he got pneumonia. He wasted away for a few days, got worse and worse. Family knew perfectly well that there wasn't anything that could be done, and he died. And his younger brother, who was totally ill-equipped for the job, came to power in a pattern that has repeated itself almost down to the exact personnel involved more than once in the House of Windsor. And this book is by Theo Aronson, and it is a romp. It is so much fun. It's Prince Eddy and the homosexual underworld. That is a man sashaying around to solicit other men, and there is a powerful nobleman being caught in the net of the Cleveland Street scandal, of a massive scandal that rocked England, and where boys were being used to lure high-class gentlemen into homosexual trysts, and the whole thing threatened to blow open. And one of the people involved hinted that someone from the royal family was involved. Suspicions fell immediately on Prince Albert Victor, immediately on him. And is it possible that he had some sort of connection with the Cleveland Street scandal? Is it possible that he had some sort of homosexual second life that he was hiding from the world? And this book just delightfully, it's not salacious. I mean, it's an inherently salacious subject, but it's delightful in the sense of a really smart author who just goes at the subject with abandon, just goes at the subject with as much interest as possible. That's why it's so much fun. I wish that all history were written like this. And the author goes at the Cleveland Street scandal. There are a couple of other scandals that were perilously close to the outer orbit of Prince Eddy, and Prince Eddy is no stranger at all to that kind of associated scandal, because there was one crackpot book that suggested that Prince Eddy was Jack the Ripper. I can't help but laugh when I hear that, not only because there are several hundred witnesses and certified court registers that prove that he wasn't anywhere near Whitechapel at most of the dates involved, but also, and more realistically, the one impression that everybody had of Prince Albert Victor from when he was a child until the week before he died, the one impression that everyone had, his own father, King Edward, his various aunts, and all of his various tutors, all of his friends, his own brother, the one impression they all had is that this was someone, even in the course of monarchy, who was arrestingly stupid. Just arrestingly stupid. One of his tutors said there was no more point to trying to instruct them than trying to instruct the horse who's carrying the carriage, who's drawing the carriage. Just incapable of learning, just a brick. It seems unlikely to me that such a figure could be Jack the Ripper, even if Prince Eddy had been not only in London, but in Whitechapel on the days in question. I think you could find a whole bunch of better candidates. Then not only was he incredibly stupid and incredibly lazy, but he had no medical knowledge, no anatomical knowledge at all. If you took a knife to the belly of a young woman, he wouldn't have any idea what he was looking for, and would almost certainly have been nauseated. It wouldn't have been able to continue. The sight of blood would probably cause him to faint dead away. It was just a ridiculous theory. It was put forward most incoherently in a great book called Prince Jack. I cannot recommend, if you could find a copy of Prince Jack, I cannot recommend it strongly enough as a reading experience. There isn't a single bit of truth in it, but it reads like somebody is just yelling at you for 2 hours. But this is a serious study of not just Prince Eddy, who is a figure that is a little bit neglected in history. I mean, he would have been king, and he wouldn't have had to wait too much longer before he was king. And then things could have been very different. He had a radically different temperament from his brother. Not only that, but this is also a wonderful study of the gay underworld of England, and especially London, in the Edwardian era, the late Victorian and Edwardian era. You know, when of course it was totally illegal, when it was a mortal crime or hard labor to even intimate to such things. And yet there were people who were that way, same as there are now. What extremities were they driven to? It's a good book on all of that. You can't exactly readily fill a shelf with intelligent writings about Prince Albert Victor, and so I'll grab it when I can. I have a copy of this, but it's in terrible, terrible shape. This is just a normal hardcover. So I snapped it up to go on the Royals shelf. In the biography section, there are several Royals shelves, including this next book, which as soon as I saw it at the Brattle, I realized I don't have it, that I must have given it away. This is Michael Prestwich's big book for the Yale English Monarch series on Edward I. Edward Longshanks, the great hammer of the Scots. And this is the Yale English Monarch series. They do without a great deal of rhetorical or narrative flourish in order to be the definitive final word on their subject. So I guess what I'm saying is they can be a little on the dry side, but boy, oh boy, they are definitive. They are, and several of them are really good. Several authors are only dry at first blush. Once you get used to their rhythm, you realize they are having a bit of fun while they write. It's just they have to cover all the ground. The volumes in the Yale English Monarch series are uniformly fantastic. And this is one that I didn't have. I have Mark Morris's book, A Great and Terrible King, which is also about Edward I, but I want this one as well. So I saw it for $1. I, of course, grabbed it. And then there's this last one. This last one's from the, I think, of the 1890s. This is the sort of thing that you will find in the Brattle sale lot. Just because. You'll find it there just because. It's not just, you know, the last 10 Tom Clancy novels that are out there. You never know what you're going to find, as you can tell from the books we've seen so far. But this one is really old. And it was out there anyway. What is the date on this? I believe it's 1893. Let's see. Is it so old that it's not going to tell me? Yeah, 1892. So, yeah, it would probably come out in bookstores in 1893. This is The Life and Letters of Washington Allston. Let me get you a picture of Washington Allston. This was inscribed by Harriet Tolman, who also put a bookplate in there, and who was one of the names behind the Tolman Reference Library for the Massachusetts Fine Arts, for the Massachusetts Museum of Fine Arts. There is our Washington Allston was a great painter. I'm sure he's completely forgotten now. Probably you can get one of his paintings for $1.50. But he was really good, and this is a full-dress biography of him, probably the only one that exists. The author, in his preface, writes, "The present day is a day," this was 1893, "the present day is a day of specialities, of classification and directness. Philosophy is eliminated from narrative, and reflections, speculative or critical, are out of place in the story of a life." Keep in mind, that's true, and that is still true. Authors are not expected to to expand on various philosophical subjects in the middle of a biography. None of the biographies that I've just shown you do this. But once upon a time, it was fairly common to do, and this author is clearly lamenting that that's no longer the case. How far the canon of criticism enforcing this elimination may be carried out without overreaching and missing its purpose, I will not presume to decide. Doubtless it may be carried to an objectionable extreme. I have obeyed the edicts of the critical public in this matter so far as to feel almost like apologizing for the measure of my obedience. And I doubt very much that that's going to be the case. I'm sure that the author is going to expound. And where he doesn't, Washington Allston will, because Washington Allston was a terrific painter and a voluble letter writer, a wonderful appreciator of art, and a long time ago, his friend, Richard Henry Dana, but not Richard Henry Dana Jr. Some of you may know Richard Henry Dana Jr. is the author of 2 Years Before the Mast, which has been often reprinted, and you can sometimes see it in used bookstores. But Richard Henry Dana Sr. was a wise and gentle and wonderful man and a friend, and had planned for years to write a full-dress biography of Washington Allston, and he died before he could do it. Washington Allston was a friend of Coleridge. He was a well-known and well-respected painter in his own day, and we'll never get Richard Henry Dana Sr.'s biography of him. Instead, this book was written in the shadow of that. I believe that Flagg wrote this with Dana's drafts and notes, spread out on the table in front of him, so that this is as close as we're ever going to get. I ordinarily don't have a whole lot of patience with artist biographies. They don't tend to do a lot for me. I make a few exceptions in that regard. Like, for instance, I don't have to like the artist. The Richardson ongoing multi-volume biography of Picasso, which is just about to end, it's just about to wrap up this year, is an incredible, a masterful work. Jed Pearl's book on his 2-volume work on Calder, another thing where the artist is a complete fraud, no talent whatsoever, but I love Jed Pearl's writing, so I read both those books and loved them. And the same thing is true here, not only because I know a lot about the story of Washington Allston, especially once he came back and lived in Cambridge, but also just for what might have been, because I don't think you're ever going to get another biography of this artist. I think he's as out of vogue as you can get, because his pictures try to look like something and try to be beautiful and try to evoke moods in their viewers, instead of being all about the artist and easily reproducible by a chimpanzee with a can of paint. They aren't like that, so they've fallen out of favor in today's art world. But one way or another, for $1, I had to grab this. I'm sure it will be fun to read. And it's the old style life and letters, where the biographer will be writing about what happens to the subject, but you'll also be getting huge amounts of letters. I have a whole shelf of these older things from the 1890s, all I've got at the Brattle. And though that kind of life and letters thing is not done anymore at all. In biographies, in more normal biographies, it's just expected that you will cover that ground yourself. The most that will be done was just recently done, where Langdon Hammer did a big 800-page biography of the great poet James Merrill. And then this year, years ago, he did that biography, and then this year he brought out a separate volume of letters, of James Merrill letters. And once upon a time, he would just have incorporated those letters into his biography, and it would have been a life and letters of that. It used to be the normal way. It's not done anymore. But anyway, I had to grab this. So we have a Washington Allston biography. Then we have an Edward I biography. We have Prince Eddy and the homosexual underworld. I wrote about Prince Eddy for my year with the Windsors. Years and years ago, I did a long essay on each member of the Windsor family over the course of a whole year. Keep meaning to go and brush those up, find them, put them in good condition, maybe even make a little booklet out of them, with annotations and whatnot. And I did one called Prince Eddy and the Blackguards for that. It was tremendous fun. If I remember, I will go and clean it up and put a link to it. Then we have The Green Dragoon. I can't believe the Brattle provided me with a second copy of this book, of Benaster Tarleton's biography. I believe the only one he's ever had. Then The Regicide Brief, about the man who made it legal to kill your king. English Country Houses by Vita Sackville-West in this Britain in Pictures series. What else we got here? Michael Innes, Appleby Mysteries, 3 Appleby Mysteries. My Life and Loves by Frank Harris. Weatherland by Alexander Harris. We're running out of room here, we are or no? And these 2 Benson volumes from Wordsworth Classics, from Sean Standfast Classics. So there you go. Not a bad trip to the Brattle. There was a whole bunch more that I could have got. But again, as with most of my recent visits to the Brattle, I stopped when I had too much to carry, which I think you'll agree is the only right reason to stop in a used bookstore that's full of goodies, is you want to stop when you can't carry anymore. You'll never, if you're out in the sale lot of the Brattle, you will never stop because of money. Even at my poorest, I never stopped because of money was out there. I always stopped because I can't carry anymore comfortably. But anyway, well, that was my Brattle trip for today. No Brattle trips until next week, so that's going to have to hold us over. But I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.